Dave Palumbo here with another RX Muscle Rant. Today's topic, where the heck do you inject? I can't tell you how many emails I get from people asking me about injection sites and which, compounds you want to put where, and where do you put, water-based like growth hormone and peptides, and where do you put anabolic steroids, and where do you put site injection oils, and everyone's confused and no one knows if you should do it subcutaneous, if you should do it intramuscular. So I'm going to give you my bird's eye view, which doesn't mean anything. This is just my opinion, how I think things work the best. In my experience of injecting over the last, whatever it was, 25 years, where I feel things go the best and you have the least problems with it. First of all, I did a whole rant several months back, it might even be over a year now, about why you don't want to inject into your quads. So let's stick, I'm not going to rehash that whole thing. Let's assume we're not injecting quads with anything in terms of nothing intramuscular into the quad, whether it be anabolic steroids or even whether it be GH or any little insulin pins. We don't do intramuscular into the quads. I'm going to talk about in a little minute what you can do subcutaneous. Nothing intramuscular, too many veins and arteries and nerves, and all you can do is cause problems. So let's start with the basics. Anabolic steroids, oil-based steroid injections, which you're using usually probably a 23 or 22 gauge inch and a half syringe. Those things go best to the big body parts because they absorb easily, okay? Glutes, okay? Delts and lats. Lats being right along, here, the meaty part here, not in the back, right? The part that kind of flares out here, right in here, okay? Right into the medial delt of the front part of the medial delt, and we're right into the ridge of your glutes. Those are the best places to put oil-based stuff because it's not going to leak out. You can go nice and deep with an 1.5 inch needle and you're going to get good absorption from those areas. If you start looking for smaller body parts like calves or triceps, it works, okay? And you can use a slightly smaller needle. It takes longer to go in and there's much greater chance of it leaking out under the muscle. Now, what happens if that happens? Well, what can happen is if it doesn't go deep enough into the muscle, it gets under the skin and it acts as an irritant, okay? Now, I know some people actually do, subcutaneous, which means under the skin, steroid injections, oil-based. That seems to be like a new thing that people were suggesting for a while. I think it's ludicrous. All it does is irritate the skin. It leaves a globulate of oil under the skin. Not good idea. You want to go deep into the muscle. We cosmetically don't want to see this stuff. If you're doing hormone replacement and you don't care, then and you have a lot of body fat in you already, then probably whether you do subcutaneous or intramuscular won't matter. But steroid shots should go deep into the muscle if you're a bodybuilder, okay? Stick with the big, large body parts, like I said, glutes, delts, okay, and lats. I wouldn't go anyplace else, okay? When you start doing rear delts, front delts, it starts getting lumpy looking. If you get some scar tissue buildup, it's hard to get rid of it. It doesn't look good. They're soft muscle groups. I'm just telling you, I've seen disasters when it comes to that. Calves, because the circulation is not as good in your lower leg, I would be careful of that as well. I know people that like to inject Winstrol into their calves. Big mistake. Now, water-based anabolic steroids like Winstrol or test suspension, those also should go deep into the big body parts. Okay, why? Because we want good absorption. These water-based compounds tend to become infected much more easily because bacteria grow well in a water-based environment. So you got to be very careful about sterility, swabbing the skin with alcohol before so that you don't push bacteria into those areas. Imagine you take a needle, you're doing a Winstrol injection, which is water-based, on dirty skin, you're pushing it in, pushes the dirt into the Winstrol suspension that goes under your skin or into the muscle, and then the bacteria just grow there. We don't want that, okay? So make sure you go nice and deep. Try not to use very short pins. Like I said, 1 to 1.5 inches is ideal. If you're a big guy, definitely go with 1.5 inches. You're better off going, deeper than less deep. That's just the way it is. And when you use a bigger gauge needle anyway, the stuff goes in much more easily. You're not sitting and pushing for 10 minutes, which will drive you nuts, all right? To me, the lats are the easiest muscle to do. Some people don't have the flexibility to do it. I always went in the mirror and grabbed the door and kind of went under the lat, under my arm and did it. I just liked it because it went in so smoothly, it went in easily. The muscle is very porous, can hold a lot of oil there, and there's not that many problems. If you start doing biceps and triceps, once again, with oil-based, anabolics, they can irritate. A lot of times they could cause scar tissue buildup. I prefer to stick with the site injection oils like Painless Pumps or Chris Clark, synthesized for the biceps, triceps, and calves. Those are the round, small muscle groups. There's no drug in there, so that it's not irritating the muscle, less likely to get infected, especially if you're using sterile technique. So that's what I prefer with those body parts. But when getting back to the anabolics, you know, people are always asking me, can I go subcutaneous with this? Should I put it in my rear delts? Don't go with small muscle groups. Go with big muscle groups. Like I said, I'm going to keep repeating it because people don't listen. Glutes, lats, medial delt, okay? People are going to say, but the legs are such a big body part. You said big body. I said, but you got to remember, no leg injections. We just said it right from the beginning. Rule number one was that no quad injections. And I go ask anyone who's taken a bad quad injection why I don't want you injecting your quads, and you'll know why. Don't inject your quads. I don't care if you've been doing it for 10 years and never had a problem. The next injection you do, you'll have a problem. And then you'll say, why didn't I listen to Dave? Now, let's go to the peptides and water-based, stuff. Not water-based steroids. We're talking about protein hormones that are basically look like water. HCG, okay, growth hormone, all the GH releasing peptides, IGF-1. I recommend doing these intramuscular. Okay, that means loading them in an insulin pen, okay, and putting them right in your deltoid muscle. Not obviously where you put in the steroid shot, but just, you can move it around. But it doesn't matter where you do it. Anywhere in the delt is easy to do. Very simple. Okay, there's no fat on your delt really. So there's no risk of doing that. Just pop it right in there. Now, a lot of people suggest doing subcutaneous injections. I mean, you've heard it. Put the GH into the fat around your stomach, That's stupid. Okay, first of all, water-based, protein hormone shots don't go intra, or they call it intradermally. They don't go into the dermis. They don't go into the fat. They go under the skin. That means between the skin and fat layer and the muscle layer, that's where you're putting it. So you're pinching the skin up, you're putting a needle in, and you're pushing the fluid in, okay? The problem is if you have a lot of body fat or you have a decent amount of body fat, you could get the stuff into the fat rather than under the fat because the insulin needle is not long enough in some people because they got a thick layer of fat. The problem with that is it gets trapped in there sometimes and it doesn't go anywhere. And a lot of times it irritates that area, that tissue, and what you get is these pockets all over your stomach of red welting. Okay, especially if you're using water that's not pH balanced properly, sometimes it can be a little acidic and it will irritate the tissues. And I tell people, you're a bodybuilder. Do you want marks on your stomach and welts on your stomach? That's the worst place to have them because that's the most visible area, the chest and the abdomen. So don't do it. There's no local acting effect of GH. So if you inject the GH in your stomach, you're not burning more fat there. It's got to get into your bloodstream. So you might as well just put it into your delt. There's been tons of research articles to show that the quickest absorbability of a peptide type hormone is intramuscular route of injection, okay? Not subcutaneous. The only subcutaneous injections that I recommend people do are insulin. If you're gonna do insulin, whether it be a fast acting like a Humalog or somewhat fast acting like Humulin R, or the long acting ones like Lantus or Tresiba, do them subcutaneous. Now, some people do them, under the skin in their stomach. Once again, you can get welting there. So I don't really love that area. But if you go down by your knee, okay, if you look where your quad comes down to your knee, the outer portion of your quad, right by your knee, there's a lot of loose skin there. It's even if you're super crazy lean, there's skin that moves. Just lift that skin up and put it right there. It's the easiest place to absorb, to shoot it in there. No one will ever see it. It doesn't leave any marks because there's no fat there. There's no chance of getting that into the fat cells there, okay? It's gonna go right under the skin there. It's so thin, that skin down by your knee. I'm not talking the skin over your knee, I'm talking the skin over the lower part of your quad, the outer portion, not the inner portion. You never want to shoot that inner area of the quad. It's very sensitive, a lot of nerves there, and that also gets irritated really easily. So it's the lateralis muscle, the vastus lateralis on the outer portion, down close to the knee, toward the end of the quad. That's the place I always did it my whole career. Never had a problem. Never had a welt, never had any issues with it whatsoever. Can you do it on your arm? Lifting, yeah. I mean, your arm doesn't have a lot of fat either. I mean, if you can do it, but it's hard to do yourself. I know diabetics that they would just pop it right in their arm, and you could do that too. But you know what? I always like subcutaneous. I think intramuscular, sometimes the insulin gets in a little too fast, and if you're not eating quick enough, or you could get a low blood sugar effect. So from insulin, I like to go sub-Q. Plus, it's a very small amount of liquid. I mean, it's teeny tiny amounts you're doing. So it really, even if you got it under the skin, I mean, even if you didn't get it under the skin and it went, intradermally, which is into the fat, it's such a small amount, it'll get absorbed anyway. So that insulin, fine, everything else intramuscularly. For steroid, fat-based, oil-based steroids, you're gonna do them into the big muscles, glutes, lats, delts. For the protein hormones, you can pretty much put them anywhere, okay? We never inject the quads, remember. Never inject the quads with intramuscular injections because of the fact that they're supravascular and they have a tremendous nerve network going through there. Very, very, very easy to get, and plus the muscle is very dense there. So the stuff gets trapped, you get bacteria growing in there, and before you know it, they're filleting open your leg. Not something that you want to do. Now, one thing you should take note of when you're doing injections, if a day after the injection, it starts to swell up, it turns red, it gets warm to the touch, and it gets progressively worse over the next couple days rather than better, that's the time to either go to the doctor, which is the smart thing to do, or if you have antibiotics, start taking some kind of antibiotics and if you're going to use antibiotics, you got to go the whole course. You can't just do 3 days of antibiotics. You got to do 7 to 10 days. Usually some kind of a penicillin-based antibiotic. I personally think Augmentin is the best for skin bacteria infections, 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day for 7 to 10 days. For bad infections, you might have to go as long as 14 days. And once again, antibiotics, those type of antibiotics are always taken with food. I don't like some of these protein synthesis inhibiting antibiotics because a lot of them can cause tendon tears. Okay, so stick with the penicillin-based ones like the cephalosporins or the amoxicillin-based ones. Regular amoxicillin is just not good on skin bacteria because the bacteria acclimate to it and they get immune to it very quickly. But if you use Augmentin has that added benefit to it. It has a clavulanic acid added to the amoxicillin, which makes it prevents the amoxicillin from becoming antibiotic resistant. So that's probably the best way to go. If I was doing injections on a regular basis, and I always had antibiotics on hand just to play it safe. Because the last thing you want to have to do is go begging to a doctor to get antibiotics, especially if you're traveling or you just don't have access to a doctor, or especially if you don't have the health insurance. But that's another whole rant I could do on another basis. So to reiterate and to go over this again once and for all, so people don't need to question me and text me 400 times with the same answers or the same questions to the same answers. Here it is. Anabolic steroids, oil-based and the water-based ones. And once again, people ask me this all the time, can you mix the Winstrol, water-based Winstrol with oil-based steroids? You can actually. In the same syringe, you shake it up almost like a salad dressing and you can inject it in, not a problem. Just make sure you use sterile technique. Glutes, lats, medial delts, or lateral delts, the same thing. I like to use the front anterior part of that side delt. Those are the places you want to put them. Water-based protein hormones like growth hormone, IGF-1, GH releasers, all these thymosin, beta, compounds out there. Anything that you're getting from these peptide sites goes intramuscular with an insulin pin, usually in somewhere into the delt. I wouldn't put it the same spot you're putting your anabolic steroid injections, but move it around. You really can't go wrong in terms of where you're going to put those. Insulin, however, subcutaneous, under the skin, lower portion of the leg, the skin is loose and thin there, that's the best place to put it. Remember, no quad injections intramuscularly. All right, those are the rules. If you stick to them, the Dave Palumbo rules of injection, I don't think you're gonna have any problems whatsoever. I'm Dave Palumbo with another RX Muscle Rant.